All of that leads obviously to saying that we are living and will continue to live in a world dominated by computer processing. The power that computers have to process large amounts of data has literally only in the last 16 to 18 months phenomenally increased. I'll give you a real life example. Tesco, the big supermarket chain in the United Kingdom, collects 1.5 billion pieces of data every month. 1.5 billion pieces of data from the RFID chips in every single piece of stuff that moves through their supermarkets, to every transaction that happens, to staff movements, to feedback from the searches that happen on their website. Not just what people buy, but from what people search for on their websites. And all of that data gets collated and pulled together, and from that, Tesco then customizes all sorts of things, like what stock is put into which stores. And if you receive an advertising leaflet, which you do regularly if you live in the United Kingdom, and it comes through your door and through your postbox, that piece of advertising, that little brochure, is customized for you. There is no one-size-fits-all. There's no broadcast advertising anymore from Tesco's perspective. But how do you process 1.5 billion pieces of data every month? You can't do it in an Excel spreadsheet. And you can't put the results up on a PowerPoint slide unless you are taking that pipe of data and working with it in fundamentally different ways. Different ways like, for example, processing it through infographics. This is a new word that we're using which talks about the visual processing of data. We don't look at the numbers anymore. We take that data and we turn it into visual graphs. The earliest version of this, of course, was the pie chart, but it goes well beyond that with some very complicated visual views of your data, and then you begin to see patterns emerging. You begin to see colors and shapes that begin to make sense of the data, and where a shape stands out, you then dive into the data and say, what's going on there? But that's a skill that most people in this room are not comfortable with, because we've grown up in a world of data and numbers. We've grown up in a world where we only use the one side of our brain to look at something analytically. Maybe the right question for you to be asking yourself is simply this. If Apple designed your reporting systems, what would they look like? Windows 8 has just been launched just the other day, but when Windows Vista was launched, Bill Gates did the launch of it. Famously, that was when it actually crashed while he was doing the launch. It was fantastic. So look at the YouTube video clip. Somebody got fired that day. It was great fun. But after the launch, he was asked by the journalists, first question was, Mr. Gates, please tell us, what is the advantage of this new version of Windows? What have you really done here? What's so clever about it? And he said, oh, I'm glad you asked that question. It's got to do with the underlying code and the kernel of the actual operating system that now integrates, especially all of the underlying security, into one central. He might have been right. And it might have been the most stable operating system they ever produced, the most secure, who knows? But that's how Windows answers the question. Just a few weeks later, Apple released their operating system 10, OS 10. Steve Jobs did the announcement and was asked almost exactly the same question. So, Mr. Jobs, in this latest version of Apple's operating system, what's the big improvement? What's the big news here? And without flinching, Steve said, the best thing about this new operating system on our computers is that the icons are so gorgeous you want to lick your screen. That's why you have iPads on your lap and not anything else. They may not even be the best computers, but they understand this concept of visually gorgeous, of easy to use, of easy to access and understand. What would your systems look like? What would your innovation process look like if it was designed by Apple? I started working at KPMG in 1991 in their Johannesburg office. When I joined KPMG, they had decided to become one of the leading firms in the use of computer technology and this processing, essentially called computer-assisted auditing processes. And I was involved in the early stages of that. They had imported some computers to be able to do that. These were the world's greatest and earliest versions of, they weren't quite laptop computers. The Apple SE30 was more a luggable computer than a portable computer. But still, it allowed us to move computers around for the first time. We bought 62 of these at KPMG, and if we networked those 62 computers together, we would have had more computing processing power than the American government had in 1991. These would make great doorstops now, but they were fantastic back then. And as a young graduate coming into KPMG, I was amazed. Unbelievable technology available to me in the office. I could not afford this stuff at home. I couldn't even dream of accessing this. More than that, we had a fax machine on every floor. We had a color photocopier just 2 floors down, and I could use it. It was remarkable. I was in awe. I would come in early and leave late just to spend some personal time using the equipment I had available. I wonder what the experience is of the average graduate who joined Haniel this year. As they arrived in your office, have they been amazed or horrified at the technology made available to them? This is not a dig at you, this is everybody. I don't know of any company around the world where a young person will walk in and feel amazed and in awe at the technology. In fact, it's the opposite. They cannot believe that you are 3 software updates behind. And so they say, you know what, I will pay for it myself. I just need a few apps to help me work here. And they try and load the apps, and of course, IT administration has locked them out. And then, as Don said earlier, they then try and complain about it to their friends on Facebook, and they're banned from using that as well. It is insanity. We do not need a step change. Who put IT in charge? IT is supposed to be a service to the organization, not the compliance heart of the business. Yes, I understand risk, but there is something called acceptable risk. You want no risk? Let's shut the company down. That's the least risky option we can take. Seriously, I know there are a few IT people in the room, and I'm not making friends right now. I understand your role, but I'm also telling you, you are wrong. If you want to open up innovation, this is important. And this is holding you back. It's holding you back from a technical perspective. It's holding you back from a Wikinomics perspective, this open collaboration perspective. And it's holding you back from a staffing perspective, from a generational perspective. You might not like to hear this message. You might think I'm wrong. But how else are you going to open up the systems? How else are you going to get collaboration? How else are you going to get innovation? If you're not getting as much innovation as you want, maybe you have to listen to this point I'm making.